Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I do appreciate you being with me so very, very much. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I have to tell you, in all honesty, I always look forward to being able to film, produce the videos. I always enjoy, well, for the most part, the comments on YouTube. I had some people lately that, boy, Preston is just, he's just about the worst there is. He's a cult leader. He's this, he's that. But, and some of you have said, Don, don't let any of this deter you or distract you or discourage you. And look, I got to tell you, folks, I've developed a real thick skin over the years. And when people post their ugly, unchristian, caustic, and hateful comments, most of the time I just shake my head. Because ridicule, folks, is not refutation. And when people try to make arguments that all you've got to do is read the text. One guy on YouTube calling me a heretic, calling me a false teacher, said that in Hebrews chapter 12, where the writer says, now, yet once more signifies the removal of those things that are shaken. And he denied that. He said the shaking does not mean the removal of anything. Well, it says, this saying, yet once more signifies the removal of that which is shaken. That shows you the desperation, folks. When someone has to resort to completely altering, 180 degrees out, the text, the biblical text, for what it actually says, in order to support their view, guess what? They are wrong, and they know they are wrong. Well, enough of that. All right. I want to get right back into Matthew chapter 22 because we are continuing our examination of Matthew 25, 1 to 13. Look, if Matthew 25, 1 to 13 is not talking about some yet future coming of the Lord at the end of the Christian age, the current age, then the Olivet Discourse is not divided at all. Now, here's a question for you. Is the coming of the Lord for the wedding of Matthew 25 a different wedding from Matthew 22? If it is, do we have two different sons of men? Do we have two different kingdoms? After all, Matthew 22, the kingdom of heaven is like. Matthew 25, the kingdom of heaven is like. Hello? There is no difference. This is the same wedding. And while, Matthew 25 doesn't use the specific term, coming of the Son of Man, it's the same. Which brings up an issue of hermeneutic, but I'll talk about that more later. Okay, I begin sharing with you a few thoughts from Matthew chapter 22 about a certain king made a great wedding feast for his son. Folks, honestly, do we have any question about who the father is, who the son is, what the wedding is? And this concept of the wedding feast takes us right back to the Old Testament. Takes us right back to Isaiah 25, 6 through 8. Takes us right back to Isaiah 65. My servant shall eat, you shall be hungry. My servant shall drink, you shall be thirsty. That's the wedding feast. Okay, so the master sent out his servants to call those who had already been invited. But those who had been invited were not willing to come. Verse 4, he sent out other servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I prepared my dinner. My oxen and fatted cattle are killed and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. And yet, once again, as I shared with you yesterday, I've had people just flat out tell me, this is not about the wedding. It's not about the marriage. I wonder why it uses the terminology of marriage and wedding. Anyway, But they made light of it. They went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. Now ponder first of all, is this the same story as we find in Matthew 21:33 and following, of a man who owned a vineyard? He let it out to workers, and when the time of the vintage came, he sent his servants to them to gather the vintage harvest. They persecuted, mistreated, and killed those servants. He sent out other servants, just like Matthew 22. They mistreated them. And finally he said, I will send my son. Surely they will honor him. But instead they said, see, here's the son. Let us slay him and take the inheritance for ourselves. Now, based upon the hermeneutic of some people, in one discussion just recently, one provocateur said, well, Isaiah chapter 2 and the day of the Lord there cannot be the same day of the Lord as 2 Peter chapter 3, because 2 Peter chapter 3 is the burning of the earth and the elements thereof, and Isaiah chapter 2 is just the shaking of the earth mightily. Folks, this exhibits such an incredible ignorance, and I want to be kind. It's difficult to be respectful to people who have such an incredible ignorance. Ignorance is not such a terrible thing, except when you couple it with arrogance. And in this particular case, this individual's ignorance is only outstripped and outdone by the arrogance. So, to argue, Isaiah must be different from 2 Peter 3 because of the different use, or the use of different terminology, slightly different terminology. Well, let's apply that. Matthew chapter 21, the master of the vineyard, hey, you know what? It doesn't call him the Father. But Matthew 22 is talking about the Father. Hey, these must be different stories of different events at different times. They're not describing the same events. They're not describing the same people. Oh, but wait, we're not even finished. Matthew 21 is about a parable. Matthew chapter 22 is about a wedding. Those are totally separate situations. Right? Must be different events. Right? No. That's really quite a ludicrous argumentum ad desperatum type of thing. And then we have the time of harvest versus the time of the wedding. Two different things, right? Oh, and in Matthew 21, we have the sending of the Son. In Matthew 22, we don't have a word whatsoever about the sending of the Son. Therefore, according to some people's hermeneutic, these must be talking about different times, different events, different people. And yet, you know what? I don't know of a single commentary. Now, obviously, I haven't read every commentary ever produced, but in all of the years of my reading on Matthew 21 and Matthew 22, I have never read, and I've got a shelf right over there that's, that long of nothing but books on the parables. I have never read a single commentary that ever suggested, ever hinted, ever inferred that Matthew 21 and Matthew 22 describe two different events, unrelated to each other, that describe two different, one's the owner of a vineyard, the other's a father, so they can't be the same thing. Not one book's ever suggested that. Not one author has ever suggested. In Matthew 21, we have the sending of the Son. Matthew 22, we don't have the sending of the Son. Therefore, they got to be different. Listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. Hermeneutic is the key to proper understanding of Scripture. And when we start trying to impose, pardon me, such a ridiculous, and yes, I use that term, such a ridiculous hermeneutic based upon our own concepts, not Hebraic concepts, not Hebraic literature, not Hebraic thought, but our own views of literature and journalism. When we start imposing our views on the ancient scriptures, we are virtually guaranteed to misinterpret the scripture. And really, let's face it, in about 99.9% of the cases, in which people argue, and I was reading some comments on YouTube and Facebook just this morning, hey, I don't see the words AD 70 in this text over here, therefore it can't be speaking of that. Well, okay, once again, I don't see the term coming of the Lord in Matthew 22, therefore it can't be the same as Matthew 21. But no one takes that position. And so let me say again, hermeneutic is the entire key. If we impose our modern, Occidental, Greek worldview of language, literature, and thought onto these ancient texts, we are doomed to misinterpretation. Now, this morning has been a little bit of a divergence from our actual exegesis, although we've touched on the proper exegesis. But you know, from time to time, I just have to draw us back. What's the popular phraseology these days? Circle back? I just have to circle back and talk about hermeneutic because it is so critically important. When we start resorting to what I call the missing word, the missing element, missing terms, missing phrase, or different words, different terms, different phrases, hermeneutic, that says, well, this passage uses a different term, word, phrase, etc. from this one over here, then they must be different. Once again, we are doomed to misinterpret. And that's really all there is to it. And don't forget, March 2021, U.S. orders only. 3-book special, The Resurrection of the Dead. It was a formal debate with myself and James Jordan. Fantastic debate. 70 weeks are determined for the resurrection. And Sam Frost, excellent book that he wrote when he was still of the right mind. Excuse me, I just had to say that, but it's true. But it's an excellent book entitled Exegetical Essays on the Resurrection. Normally, it would cost you $58 delivered price. For the month of March 2021, U.S. orders only. Guess what? $35 post-paid. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a wonderful banner right up at the very top. Just click on it and march right through it. You'll be really, really glad that you ordered these books. All right? I'll see you on the flip side.